All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are going deep into UK criminal law.
Spooky sighting.
Yeah. Specifically, we're going to be talking about property offenses.
Okay.
And, it's actually way more interesting than it might sound at first.
I bet it is.
Yeah, so you actually sent in a lecture PDF on this topic.
Yeah.
So let's unpack it together.
Yeah.
And we'll uncover some of the, the fascinating little nuances
Okay.
of crimes against property.
You're right. It's not all about shoplifting.
No.
You know what's really intriguing about this area of law is how it kind of gets to the core of like ownership and value.
Yeah.
And we'll even explore how technology is adding like a whole other layer of complexity to these crimes.
Exactly. Like, get ready for some real-life cases.
Okay.
That'll make you rethink what you thought you knew about stealing and property rights.
Interesting.
But first, let's set the stage.
Okay.
What are we even talking about when we say property offenses?
Well, in UK law, property offenses actually fall into two main categories.
Right.
You've got offenses against property,
Okay.
like theft, robbery, or vandalism,
Mm-hmm.
where the aim is to take or damage something.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's the other category then?
Offenses relating to property.
Okay.
These are more about dishonest dealings,
Okay.
like fraud or money laundering.
Right.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Someone using your credit card info to buy something online,
Mm-hmm.
you haven't physically lost anything,
Right.
but they still committed a crime by abusing your financial information.
Oh, that's a good example.
Yeah.
So it's not just about physically taking something. It's
Right.
about abusing someone's rights to their property.
Yeah,
Even if it's just data.
precisely.
Yeah.
And this distinction is key because the law treats these two categories differently when it comes to like proving the crime and determining punishment.
It's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's break down
Yeah.
what actually makes a property offense a property offense.
Okay.
Our source highlights a few key elements.
Mhm.
First up, we've got the property itself.
Right.
Now, I know that sounds obvious,
Yeah.
but is it always just physical stuff?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Property also includes things like intellectual property,
Uh-huh.
patents, copyrights, trade secrets, all those creations of the mind that have value.
Right.
Stealing a song or an invention idea,
Mm-hmm.
that's a property offense too.
So basically, if it has value and someone owns it,
Yeah.
it can be subject to property offenses.
You got it.
Okay.
And the law has to be very clear about these definitions.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
how we define property has the direct impact on how we protect people's rights.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So property is the first element.
Right.
What else do we need to consider?
Ownership, of course.
Okay.
We need to establish who has the legal claim to the property in question.
Okay.
This could be an individual, a company, or even the government in some cases.
All right. Ownership, check.
Yes.
What about intent? Surely someone accidentally knocking over a vase isn't the same as intentionally smashing it, right?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Intent is critical.
Okay.
For most property offenses, you have to prove that the person meant to do it.
Right.
In legal terms, they need to have mens rea, that guilty mind.
Mens rea.
Yeah.
I'm adding that to my legal vocabulary. Okay, so they had the intention to commit the crime,
Yeah,
but they also had to actually do it right.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's where actus reus comes in.
Yep.
The guilty act,
Okay.
thoughts alone aren't enough.
Right.
They need to have actually taken an action that violates the law.
All right, so we've got our key ingredients:
Yes.
property, ownership, intent, and the actual bad deed.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get into the specifics.
Okay.
What kind of property offenses are we talking about here?
Well, get ready for a whirlwind tour
Okay.
because we're covering a lot of ground.
All right.
We'll be exploring theft, robbery, burglary, arson, and criminal damage.
Okay.
And just to add another layer,
Yeah.
we'll delve into how these offenses take on new forms in the digital age
Mm-hmm.
with cybercrime and intellectual property theft.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah,
That sounds like a lot to unpack.
it is a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's focus on those first few categories you mentioned.
Okay.
Starting with theft.
Okay.
What exactly constitutes theft in the eyes of the law?
Theft, at its core, is the dishonest appropriation of property belonging to another with the intention of permanently depriving the other of it.
Okay.
But don't let that legal jargon fool you.
Yeah.
It encompasses a lot more than just shoplifting, which is probably what first comes to mind.
So what else counts as theft?
Think about someone stealing a car or even stealing someone's identity. That's a big one in today's world.
Right.
Someone steals your personal information,
Okay.
credit card details, social security number,
Yeah.
and uses it to commit fraud.
That's terrifying. I had no idea identity theft fell under the umbrella of theft. So it's not just about the physical act of taking something,
Right.
but also about the dishonest use of someone's property.
Exactly. And it highlights how the definition of theft needs to evolve to keep up with our changing world and the way criminals operate.
Okay, so theft covers a lot of ground.
Yes, it does.
What about robbery? That sounds a lot more serious.
Robbery takes theft up a notch.
Okay.
It involves using or threatening force to take someone's property.
Okay.
Think armed robbery, mugging, or even carjacking.
Right.
All situations where violence or the threat of violence is used to steal.
Wow. Those examples definitely paint a much more intense picture
Yeah.
than simple shoplifting.
Yeah.
It makes sense why robbery is considered a more serious offense than theft alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The presence of force significantly escalates the severity of the crime.
Okay. Moving on to burglary.
Right.
Isn't that just breaking and entering?
That's part of it, but there's more to it than just that.
Okay.
Burglary involves entering a property with the intent to commit another crime, such as theft or assault.
Okay.
Just wandering into your neighbor's open garage isn't burglary,
Mm-hmm.
but if you sneak in with the intention of stealing their lawnmower,
Yeah.
well, that's a different story.
So the intent behind the entry is crucial.
It is.
It's not just about being on someone else's property.
Yeah.
It's about what you plan to do once you're there.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And burglary can be further divided into residential burglary, breaking into homes, and commercial burglary, targeting businesses.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to arson.
Okay.
Now, this one seems pretty clear-cut, setting stuff on fire.
While fire is the central element,
Yeah.
arson often goes beyond simple destruction.
Okay.
The motivations behind it can be complex, ranging from insurance fraud to revenge.
Wow, I hadn't considered those angles.
Yeah,
So someone might burn down their own property for the insurance money?
they might.
Or set fire to someone else's property as an act of revenge?
Yeah,
That's scary.
it is. And the potential for harm goes beyond just property damage.
Right.
Arson endangers lives too, making it a very serious offense.
Okay, last but not least, we have criminal damage.
All right.
This one feels like a bit of a catch-all category.
It does cover a wide range of offenses.
Yeah.
From things like graffiti or keying someone's car
Right?
to more severe acts of vandalism like smashing windows or destroying property.
So even seemingly small acts of destruction can land you in trouble.
Absolutely.
Wow.
The law recognizes that even minor damage can be costly and distressing for the victim,
Right.
and the consequences can be quite serious depending on the extent of the damage.
This is already so interesting.
Yeah.
We've covered the spectrum from stealing a candy bar to burning down a building.
Yeah, it's a big spectrum.
But before we go any further, let's take a step back
Okay.
and look at the legal framework behind all of this.
Great.
What are the laws that actually define these offenses in the UK?
The cornerstone of property offenses in the UK is the Theft Act of 1968. Along with the Theft Act of 1978 and the Criminal Damage Act of 1971, Right. they essentially lay out the rules of the game,
Okay.
defining what constitutes a crime,
Yeah.
what the elements of each offense are,
Hmm.
and what the penalties might be.
Okay, so these acts are like the rule books for property offenses in the UK.
Exactly.
But before you launch into a full-on law lecture, I want to reassure our listener that we're not going to get bogged down in legal jargon.
No.
We're just going to highlight the key takeaways from these laws.
You got it. We'll keep it clear and concise,
Okay, good.
focusing on how these laws are applied in real-world situations.
Speaking of real-world situations, our source mentions some pretty fascinating cases from UK courts.
They are fascinating.
Cases that really show these laws in action.
Yeah.
So cool.
Case law is crucial because it shows us how the law is interpreted and applied.
Mm-hmm.
Each case helps to clarify what exactly constitutes a property offense
Right.
and how different factors can influence the outcome.
So it's not just about what's written in the law books.
Exactly.
It's about how those laws are used to make judgments in real-life scenarios.
Precisely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, hit me with some of these intriguing cases.
Okay.
I'm ready for some legal drama.
Let's do it. Welcome back to our deep dive into UK criminal law.
Those cases we just discussed were wild.
Yeah, they are.
Who knew that stealing a dead body could be so legally complicated?
I know, right?
Or that a drug dealer could be the victim of theft?
It really highlights how the law has to adapt to some pretty strange and unexpected situations.
And speaking of adapting,
Yes.
it makes me think about how much our lives have moved online these days.
Right.
Does that change things when it comes to property offenses?
Absolutely. Cybercrime throws a whole new wrench into things.
Oh, yeah.
Because now we have crimes that transcend borders
Right.
and use sophisticated techniques that are really hard to track and prosecute.
It feels like every day there's a news story about a data breach.
Yeah.
Or some company getting hacked.
It's a constant thing these days.
Is the law even equipped to handle this kind of thing?
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
Law enforcement and legal professionals are constantly playing catch-up.
Right.
Developing new strategies and tools to fight cybercrime.
Okay.
But it requires a global effort, strong partnerships between governments and tech companies, and a deep understanding of how technology works.
So it's not just about having laws on the books.
Right.
It's about having the resources and expertise to actually enforce them in the digital world.
Exactly. We need specialized units dedicated to investigating cybercrime.
Okay.
And we need collaboration between countries because cybercriminals don't exactly respect national borders.
You mentioned earlier that cybercrime often involves offenses against property.
Right.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, imagine a hacker breaks into a company's system and steals sensitive customer data.
Right.
No physical property is taken.
Okay.
But it's still a violation of property rights.
So it's like stealing valuable information, exactly, rather than physical goods. But what makes that information property in the eyes of the law?
That's a great question. It all comes down to how we define property in the digital age.
Right.
This data has value to both the company and the individuals whose information was compromised.
Yeah.
It can be used for financial gain or to harm reputations.
And the consequences of these data breaches can be huge for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Financial losses.
Yeah.
Identity theft.
Right.
Reputational damage.
Yeah.
It can be devastating for both individuals and companies.
Yeah.
And this is just one example.
Okay.
There are countless ways that cybercriminals target property in the digital realm.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about hacking.
Right.
What are some of the other ways cybercriminals commit property offenses?
Phishing is a big one.
Okay.
You get an email that looks like it's from your bank or a trusted retailer, but it's actually a trap designed to steal your login credentials or credit card information.
Oh, yeah. Those fake emails are everywhere.
They are.
It's scary how convincing they can be.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's ransomware.
Oh, yeah.
That's where hackers lock you out of your own computer or files and demand payment to give you access back.
It's like they're holding your digital life hostage.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And these are just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
Cyber criminals are constantly coming up with new tactics and exploiting vulnerabilities in our digital systems.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to online security.
Maybe you should.
But seriously, is there anything we can do to protect ourselves from these threats?
Awareness is key.
Okay.
Be cautious about suspicious emails, links, and attachments.
Okay.
Use strong passwords and multi-factor authentication whenever possible.
Right.
And keep your software updated.
Okay.
Those updates often include security patches that can prevent attacks.
Okay. That's good advice. It sounds like staying safe online takes a lot of personal responsibility.
You do.
Yeah.
But we also need strong laws.
Yeah.
And law enforcement efforts to deter these crimes and hold perpetrators accountable.
So far, we've mainly focused on how cybercrime involves offenses against property, like hacking and data theft.
Yeah.
But what about offenses relating to property in the digital world?
That's where we see things like online fraud and money laundering really taking off.
Right.
Remember, offenses relating to property are about dishonest dealings and deception.
Yeah.
Even if no physical property changes hands.
Right. Like those online auction scams where people pay for items that never arrive.
Exactly.
Or those fake investment schemes that promise unrealistic returns.
Exactly. And let's not forget about romance scams.
Oh, yeah.
Where people get tricked into sending money to someone they've never met in person.
Right.
It's all about using deceit and manipulation for financial gain.
It's basically the same principles as traditional property offenses.
Yeah.
But adapted for the digital age.
Exactly. But the scale and reach of these crimes are amplified online. A scammer can target victims all over the world from behind a computer screen.
This whole conversation about cybercrime is both fascinating and a little terrifying.
I know, it's kind of scary.
It really makes you realize how vulnerable we can be in the digital world.
It's true.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't let fear paralyze us.
Right.
By understanding the risks and taking precautions, we can navigate the digital landscape safely.
Right. It's about being informed and empowered.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored the world of cybercrime.
Right.
And how it's changing the game for property offenses.
Yeah.
But beyond the digital realm,
Yeah.
what other aspects of this topic are worth exploring?
We've talked a lot about the legal definitions and the technicalities of property offenses.
Right.
But what about the human side of things?
Yeah.
What are the real-world consequences for victims and perpetrators?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
We can sometimes get so caught up in the legal aspects
I know, right?
that we forget about the actual people involved.
Exactly. For victims, property offenses can be deeply traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
Imagine having your home burglarized,
Right.
your car stolen,
Yeah.
or your identity stolen.
Yeah.
It's not just about the financial loss.
Right.
It's about the violation of your personal space and your
Yeah.
sense of security.
Right. It can really shake your trust in the world.
It can.
And what about the perpetrators?
Yeah.
What are the consequences for them?
Well, the legal penalties can range from fines and community service to imprisonment, depending on the severity of the offense.
Right.
But even beyond the legal consequences, there's this social stigma and reputational damage that comes with being convicted of a crime.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly difficult to rebuild your life after being involved in criminal activity.
This deep dive is really making me think about the ripple effects of property offenses.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's not just a legal issue.
Nah.
It's a human issue
Yeah.
with far-reaching consequences.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And as we try to understand and address these crimes,
Yeah.
we need to consider both the legal principles and the human impact.
Okay, so we've talked about the human cost of these crimes.
Right.
But before we move on, I'm curious about the role of technology in preventing and solving property crimes.
Okay.
It seems like technology is being used more and more in law enforcement these days.
You're spot on. Technology is becoming an increasingly powerful tool in the fight against crime.
Yeah.
We have advanced forensic techniques
Right.
that analyze DNA evidence,
Okay.
track stolen goods,
Yeah.
and even identify suspects based on digital footprints.
It sounds like something out of a crime show.
It does a bit.
Technology is giving law enforcement a whole new arsenal of tools
Yeah.
to investigate crimes.
It is,
Huh.
but we also need to be mindful of the ethical implications
Right.
of using technology in this way.
Yeah.
We need to ensure that we're using technology responsibly
Okay.
and not sacrificing privacy or civil liberties in the name of security.
That's a really important point.
It is.
It's about finding the right balance between using technology for good
Right.
and protecting individual rights.
Exactly. And this is a conversation that we'll need to keep having
Right.
as technology continues to advance.
This deep dive has been an eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground, from the basic elements of property offenses
Yeah.
to the rise of cybercrime and the role of technology in both committing and combating these crimes.
Yeah, it's amazing how much there is to discuss.
Well, I'm ready for more. What other fascinating areas of this topic are waiting to be uncovered? Okay, so we've explored the world of cybercrime and how it's kind of changing the game for property offenses.
We got a whole new ball game.
But beyond the digital realm,
Right.
what other aspects of this topic are worth exploring?
Well, we've talked a lot about the legal definitions and the technicalities of property offenses.
Yeah.
But what about the human side of things?
Yeah.
What are the real world consequences for victims
Yeah.
and perpetrators?
That's a great point. We can sometimes get so caught up
Yeah.
in the legal aspects
Yeah.
that we forget about the actual people involved.
Exactly. For victims, property offenses can be deeply traumatic experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine having your home burglarized,
Right.
your car stolen,
Mm-hmm.
or your identity stolen.
It can be devastating.
It's not just about the financial loss.
No.
It's about the violation of your personal space and your sense of security.
Right. It can really shake your trust in the world.
It can.
And for the perpetrators, what are the consequences for them?
Well, the legal penalties can range from fines and community service to imprisonment,
Right.
depending on the severity of the offense.
Yeah.
But even beyond the legal consequences,
Yeah.
there's the social stigma and reputational damage that comes with being convicted of a crime.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly difficult to rebuild your life after being involved in criminal activity.
This deep dive is really making me think about the ripple effects of property offenses.
Yeah.
It's not just a legal issue.
Right.
It's a human issue
It is.
with far-reaching consequences.
You're absolutely right.
So we've talked about the human cost of these crimes.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I'm curious about the role of technology in preventing and solving property crimes.
Okay.
It seems like technology is being used more and more in law enforcement these days.
You're spot on. Technology is becoming an increasingly powerful tool in the fight against crime.
Yeah.
We have advanced forensic techniques that analyze DNA evidence, track stolen goods, and even identify suspects based on digital footprints.
It's like something out of a crime show.
It does a bit, yeah.
Technology is giving law enforcement a whole new arsenal of tools to investigate crimes.
It is. But we also need to be mindful of the ethical implications of using technology in this way.
Right.
We need to ensure that we're using technology responsibly and not sacrificing privacy or civil liberties in the name of security.
That's a really important point.
It is.
It's about finding the right balance between using technology for good and protecting individual rights.
Exactly. And this is a conversation that we'll need to keep having as technology continues to advance.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into property offenses,
Yeah.
from basic definitions to the wild world of cybercrime.
We have.
And it's clear that technology is reshaping the landscape of these crimes in ways we never could have imagined even a few decades ago.
That's for sure.
But before we wrap up, I'd love to zoom out and look at the bigger picture for a moment.
Okay.
We've talked about the legal specifics,
Yeah.
the real-life cases,
Right.
the impact on people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
But how do these laws reflect our values as a society?
That's a good question.
Laws aren't just arbitrary rules.
Right.
They're supposed to represent what we consider right and wrong.
Exactly.
What are property offenses telling us about how we view ownership, fairness, and even social order?
Well, I think it's clear that UK law places a high value on private property.
Okay.
We recognize the right of individuals to own things, control them, and benefit from them.
Right.
Our homes, our cars. The things we work hard for, these aren't just objects.
Right.
They represent security and stability.
It makes sense that the law would protect those rights.
Yeah.
But how does that play out in the context of property offenses?
Those laws against the theft, robbery, burglary,
Yeah.
they all draw a line in the sand.
Okay.
They're saying, we respect individual ownership, and we won't tolerate people messing with that.
So it's about maintaining order and fairness.
Exactly.
Everyone plays by the rules.
Yeah.
Everyone's rights are respected.
And it's not just about protecting physical possessions.
Okay.
The laws against fraud, intellectual property theft, cybercrime,
Yeah.
those show that we also value intangible things like ideas, data, digital creations.
It's recognizing that property in the modern world isn't just about physical stuff anymore.
That's right.
Our online identities, our data, the things we create in the digital space, those have value too, and the law needs to adapt to protect them.
You're right. And that's where things get really interesting, because technology is pushing the boundaries of what we consider property faster than ever before.
That reminds me of those fascinating cases we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The Napster case, Google Books.
Mm-hmm.
Those really highlight the tension between protecting individual rights and promoting innovation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those cases forced us to grapple with some tough questions.
Yeah.
How do we balance the rights of copyright holders with the public interest in accessing information? How do we encourage creativity and innovation while making sure creators are fairly compensated? There are no easy answers.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
Right.
Protecting intellectual property without stifling progress or shutting down the flow of information.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's why those legal battles are so significant.
Yeah.
They force us to confront these complex issues and find solutions that work in a rapidly changing world.
So it's not just about black and white,
No.
right and wrong.
It's about navigating nuances and complexities,
Yeah.
especially as technology continues to disrupt everything.
Okay, so we've talked about how property offenses reflect our values
Right.
and how the law is constantly evolving to keep pace with change.
Yeah.
But where do we go from here?
Good question.
What does the future hold for property offenses in a world that seems to be changing faster than ever?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
As technology blurs the lines between physical and digital, tangible and intangible, we're going to have to rethink our very concepts of property and ownership.
That sounds profound.
Yeah.
Can you give us some specific examples of what this might look like?
Well, think about artificial intelligence and automation.
Okay.
Who owns the intellectual property created by AI?
That's a good question.
What about the data generated by self-driving cars? Or virtual assets in online gaming worlds?
Oh, yeah.
These are just a few examples of the new challenges on the horizon.
It's like we're entering a whole new frontier of property rights.
It feels like it, doesn't it?
How will the law keep up?
It's going to require creative thinking,
Yeah.
flexibility, and a willingness to adapt to unprecedented situations.
Right.
We might need new legal frameworks,
Okay.
new definitions,
Good. Yeah.
new ways of thinking about ownership and value.
It's exciting and a little daunting at the same time.
I know.
But I guess that's the nature of progress.
Yeah.
As we push boundaries with technology,
Right.
our laws and our understanding of the world have to keep pace.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing legal definitions.
Right.
It's about engaging in a dynamic conversation about what matters most as a society.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of property offenses and how they're being shaped by the forces of technology and social change.
I'm glad.
Before we wrap up,
Yeah.
is there one key takeaway you'd like to leave our listener with
Sure.
as they continue their exploration of UK criminal law and property offenses?
Remember that law is not static.
It's constantly evolving to reflect our values and adapt to new realities.
Yeah.
So stay curious, question assumptions, and embrace the dynamic nature of the legal world.
That's fantastic advice. Thanks for guiding us through this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
And that's a wrap on our exploration of UK criminal law and property offenses. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into a fascinating and evolving area of law. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds engaged.